Hi, this is Anil from Learning Lad and welcome to another tutorial on the C programming language. Now in this video, I'm going to show you guys how you can print the right angle triangle pattern in a C program. So here I have already drawn this pattern in the screen. As you guys can see, these stars which are aligned in such a way that it looks like a right angle triangle. And I have also drawn this image in terms of rows and columns. Here we have the rows 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, and then we have the columns 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Now we are printing this star character in the right angle triangle pattern, and if you look at this pattern here, then if you look at this first row, then we have only one star, and then in the second row we have 2 stars, and in the third row we have 3 stars. Now if we look at it again, then in the first row we have only one column. This character can be anything, we can print whatever we want. But here in the first row, the main thing is we have only one column, and in the second row we have 2 columns, and in the third row we have 3 columns, and similarly in the fifth row we have 5 columns. Now if we extend this pattern, and let's say if we're gonna have the 100th row with this pattern, then that 100th row will have 100 columns, or in other words, in that 100th row we're gonna have 100 stars. For example, here in the 4th row we have 4 stars or 4 columns. We have 4 columns and we have filled that column with the star symbol. So now how we can print this pattern by using a C program? If you closely look at this pattern, then there is a relationship between the row number and the number of stars that we want to print for that particular row. Or in other words, there is a relationship between the row number and the number of columns that we have to print for that particular row. For example, if you look at this row 1, we have 1 column or 1 star. If you look at this row 2, we have 2 stars or 2 columns. So similarly, if you look at this row 4, we have 4 stars or 4 columns. So the thing is, the number of stars that are present in a particular row is exactly equal to the row number. Or in other words, the number of columns that we have to print in a particular row is exactly equal to the row number. So here, if you look at this row number 5, the row number is 5. We need to print 5 stars or we need to print 5 columns. So this is the relationship which we have between the row number and the number of stars that we have to print for that particular row, and we're gonna use that in our program and we print this pattern. So now we're gonna see how we can write the C program to print this pattern. Now the first thing is we need to know how many number of rows that we have to print. So we are gonna use a variable to store that value, and we're gonna call that variable as number of rows. And here for the demonstration purpose, let's assume that it's gonna be 5. And in this program, I will also show you how we can ask the user to enter the number of rows, and then depending on the user's input, how we can display the pattern with whatever number of rows entered by the user. So now this is the number of rows we have. Now the next thing is, here as I said before, we are gonna print this pattern row by row. So we're gonna take the first row, we're gonna print the stars for that first row, and after printing all the stars that we have to print in the first row, we will move to the next row and then we will print the stars for the second row. And after that, we're gonna move on to the third row, and then we're gonna move on to the fourth row, and similarly we're gonna print the stars for all the rows. So here we need to store the row number here. We need to know which row number we are printing here, and that's why we're gonna use another variable and we're gonna call it as row. Now as I said before, we will be printing the required columns in all the rows. So in the first row, we will be printing this first column with this character star, and then in the second row we will be printing the first column and the second column with the character star. So here also we need to keep track of the column that we are printing. So we're gonna use another variable called column. Now the next thing is we need to loop through each rows and also each columns. So we need a loop, and that's why we're gonna use a for loop here. So first we will start with the rows. As I said before, we will start with the first row. We will print the required columns for the first row, and after that we will move on to the second row, and then we will print the required columns for the second row, and then we will move on to the third row, and we're gonna continue that. So first we start with the row number 1. Then how many rows we have to print? That value will be stored in the number of rows variable. So we want to print all the rows, and that's why we're gonna have the condition row less than or equal to number of rows. Alright, now after this we need to increment the rows value, because after printing the first row we need to move on to the second row. Then after printing the second row we want to move on to the third row. Now we need another for loop for the columns. So here also for every row we need to start from the first column, and then we need to move on until we print all the required columns. So here the column value also will start from the 1. Column equal to 1, and the condition here column less than or equal to how many columns that we want to print for a particular row. As I said before, we know how many columns we have to print for a particular row, and that is nothing but the row number. That is, for the third row we need to print 3 columns. So that 3 columns is nothing but the row number 3. And we have the relationship here, that is the number of columns that we have to print for a particular row is exactly equal to the row number. And here we have the row number in this row variable. So we have the condition column less than or equal to row, and then we will increment the column value variables value, so that after printing a particular column we can move on to the next column. Alright, now the next thing that we want to do is we want to print the character. Here in this pattern we are printing the star, so we're gonna print out the star here in the inner for loop. Now after printing a particular row we need to take the output to the next line here, and that's why after every row's execution we want to add a new line. So here we're gonna use a printf function, and we will add or append a new line here. So this new line insertion will be after this for loop, that is the columns for loop or inner for loop. Alright, then we will close the outer for loop or the for loop which is used for the rows. So we're gonna be using this logic and we will be writing the program. So now let's see how we can write the program, and once we write and execute the program, then also I'll explain how things will work. Now I have opened up the CodeBlocks IDE, and here I have already declared the main function, and here the first thing that we need to write is we need to declare the variables. So the variables that we're gonna need are number of rows. And for now, I'm gonna initialize this with a value of 5, and then later I will show you how you can take the input from the user and display the pattern according to the user input. Now I'm gonna take this number of rows as an integer value. We're gonna have the complete number here, and that's why the integer values. And after that, we need to keep track of the row and the column numbers. So we need a couple more variables, row and column. Alright, now we need to start printing the pattern starting from the first row. So we will use a for loop. Now the first for loop is for the row. So the row will start from 1, and then we have the condition row less than or equal to number of rows, and then after printing a particular row, we will be incrementing the row variables value so that we can move on with the next row. Now we have the for loop which will iterate through each rows. The next thing is we need to have another loop which will iterate through each columns. So we will have the for loop, and this for loop is for columns. So the column will be starting from 1, and the condition is column less than or equal to row. As I said before, for this pattern, which is the right angle triangle pattern, we have the relationship between the number of rows that we want to print for a particular row and the row number. And that's why we will have this condition. So for the first row, we will be printing only one column. Now for the second row, we will be printing 2 columns. For the third row, we will be printing 3 columns, like that. So then after printing the particular column, we will increment the column variables value, or we will move on to the next column. So here now inside this for loop, we will use the printf function, and we will print out the character that we want to print in that column. So here I will print out star, and after printing out the star, I will add a space so that the output can look neat. Alright. Now for every iteration of this for loop, we will have this for loop running completely, which is nothing but for every row, we will print out as many columns required here. Alright. Now after printing each row, we need to add a new line to take the output to the next line. And that's why we're going to use this printf function, and we're going to add a new line in here. Alright, now we're going to save this program, and we're going to build and run this. And I'm having this error because I just made this mistake in the printf function spelling. It should be printf. And after correcting that, I will build and run it again. And now this time you guys can see we have this pattern, which is the right angle triangle pattern. Now here we are displaying the stars in the right angle triangle pattern, and we have 5 rows here because we have already specified we want to display 5 rows here. Now let's take the input from the user and display this pattern with as many number of rows as the user wants. So I'm gonna remove the initialization in here, and then I'm gonna use a printf function, and I will ask the user to enter the number of rows that he wants to print. So I will ask enter the number of rows, and let's add a new line, and then we will use this scanf function, and we will take the input or the number of rows entered by the user, and we will store that in the number of rows variable. Alright, now I'm gonna save this program. I'm gonna build and run this again. Now enter the number of rows. I will say I want 10 rows, and if I hit the enter button, it will display this right angle triangle pattern with 10 rows. So here you guys can see we have 10 rows, and we have printed these stars in the right angle triangle pattern. Now let's close this, and we will run it again. And this time I'm gonna enter 20. As you guys can see, we have 20 rows now for this pattern. And one more time, let's build and run this, and let's give 1. And now this time we have only 1 star here, or 1 row here for this pattern. Now let's see how this program is gonna work. So here, first we're gonna assume that the number of rows entered by the user is gonna be 5. User wants to display 5 rows with this right angle triangle pattern. Alright, now the for loop will start. So first the row variable will be initialized with the value of 1, and then it will check row variable's value with the number of rows, which is 5 for this demonstration. And here first, for the first iteration, the condition is and right now the row variables value is 1. So 1 is less than or equal to 5, which is true. And that's why we're gonna execute the body of this outer for loop. So this for loop's body will be executed. So here first we have another for loop. Now this is for the columns. So the column variable is containing the value of 1. Column is less than or equal to row. Row variable is containing the value of 1. So 1 less than or equal to 1, which is true because 1 is equal to 1. And that's why we will print this star. So the star will be printed in the first row. First star will be printed in the first column, and then the column variable's value will be incremented. Previously column was containing 1. After incrementation it will become 2. Now again this condition will be checked whether this column variable is containing a value which is less than or equal to row variable's value. Column variable is containing 2 now after the incrementation, and it is not less than or equal to row variable's value, which is 1. And that's why this condition will fail and the for loop will stop executing. So the control will come out of this for loop and execute this printf statement. That is, it will add a new line here. Now after this statement, again the for loop will be continued. Now the row variable's value will be incremented by 1. So previously it was 1. Now after the incrementation it will become 2. Now again this condition will be checked whether 2 is less than or equal to 5, which is true, and again the for loop will be executed. Now column variable will be again initialized with a value of 1 because we want to start from the first column for the second row, and again this condition will be checked. Column variable's value is 1, whether that is less than or equal to row variable's value. Row variable's value is 2. 1 is less than or equal to 2. That is true. That's why this character will be printed in the second row's first column. So it will be printed here. Now after printing this, the column variable's value will be incremented. So previously it was 1. After the incrementation it will become 2. Now this condition will be again checked. 2 is less than or equal to 2, which is true. And that's why again this character will be printed in the second row. Alright, now the column variable is containing 2 and it will be incremented. So it will become 3. Now this condition will fail because 3 is not less than or equal to 2. Row variable is containing 2, column variable is containing 3. That's why this condition will fail. And again this printf statement will be executed and a new line will be inserted. So the control will come to next line in here. Alright, now the row variable is containing 2, it will be incremented. So it will become 3. Now again this for loop will be executed. This inner for loop will be executed. So this time it will print 3 stars. And then it will take the cursor to the next line. Then again the row variable's value will be incremented. So let me just remove this. It will become 4. Now again this inner for loop will be executed. It will print 4 stars this time. And again it will move to the next line and row variable's value will be incremented and it will become 5. And again it will print the 5 stars in here. Alright, now after that the row variable's value will be incremented and it will become 6. Let me just remove this and it will become 6. Now this condition will fail because 6 is not less than or equal to 5, which is the number of rows value. And that's why this for loop will stop executing and our program will finish execution because we don't have any other statements to execute. And that's why we're gonna get this pattern. So this is how the program will run. Now the last thing that I want to show you in this video is, we have printed this pattern with the character star. If you want, you can change this character also. So here, if you want to print 0 instead of star, then you can change that one to 0 here and build and run it. And this time let me enter 9 rows, and this time instead of stars we have zeros here. So you can print any character you want in this right angle triangle pattern. So this is it guys, this is how you guys can print the right angle triangle program in the C programming language. Now if you like this video, then give a thumbs up. If you don't like it, then give a thumbs down, and please share your opinion in the comment section. Now if you want to watch more tutorials like this from us, then subscribe to our channel and also hit the bell icon which will appear once you subscribe to our channel, so that whenever we upload new videos you will get notified. And also if you guys think that this video will help some of your friends, then share this video with them. So thank you for watching. See you later.